Hello, and welcome to Therapy Talk, a show designed to use the power of Google Plus to bring interesting and innovative therapists and those interested in psychotherapy or counseling together to share their work, their thoughts, and their ideals with each other. Now, the human potential movement in psychotherapy, while vibrant in the 1960s and 70s, has been overshadowed in the last 25 years by Big Pharma, Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, and, of course, that lovely thing called managed care. So now insurance companies decide who can be seen, how many times, by whom, using which modality. In spite of this, many therapists remain true to their mission to help others, and they're doing it in authentic, meaningful, and powerful ways. Hi, I'm Neil Brown. I'm a psychotherapist with over 30 years' experience and deeply steeped in the theory and practice of family therapy. Family therapy is a systemic way of looking at and understanding the context in which problems form and are healed. I've also studied other systemic approaches, and I've steadfastly held on to and expanded my understanding and practice of these theories. Now, after experiencing and gratefully success in my career, my desire now is to share the wealth of knowledge that I've been given with others and to help other innovative professionals share their knowledge and their gifts as well. And that way we will form a community independent of monetized and prescribed programs and learning. Now, our program today is being produced by my professional coach, Robin Holland, who will bring us your comments. So don't be shy, please bring them on. And I am thrilled today to bring to you one of my favorite people in all the world, R Fleming. John is an educational therapist and founder of Developmental Learning Solutions of Santa Cruz and San Jose. I've known John since he came to town in 1993 when he first arrived here from Washington, D.C. Since having John and Developmental Learning Solutions as a resource for my clients, I've been able to find answers and solutions for families and kids struggling with a lack of school achievement and the resulting parent-child stress that invariably occurs under those circumstances. So John is a board-certified educational therapist with a master's degree in special education with concentrations in learning disabilities and emotional disturbance that affect learning. John was the coordinator of the Cognitive Development Program at the Reading Center of George Washington University. He helped develop the Educational Therapies Certification Program at the University of California, Santa Cruz Extension Program. He has taught there. He has taught at the UC Berkeley Extension Program, and he has taught at Washington University. He is the director of DLS, and he oversees a staff of more than 24 learning professionals. He also provides direct services to his clients. Please welcome R Fleming. Hi, John. How are you today?
I'm doing quite well. Quite well. Very excited to be
here. And where am I reaching you? Which office are you at?
This is the new San Jose office, which is delightful. It's quiet right now. In a couple months, it's not going to be that way.
Okay. Well, that's a good thing. We like it when things are busy. I never could understand how you would prefer San Jose to Santa Cruz, but you've always been a city boy.
That's right.
And I've always enjoyed the coastal quiet over here, but you like the hustle and bustle of the city. So you've got it, and I got my quiet, and here we are. So, John, please share with our listeners today how it is that you became interested in the field of learning disabilities or special education.
Well, it really is a professional, personal growth. I had actually the turning point was I had just finished my undergraduate in pre-med and marine botany, and I was looking for a PhD program in mega marine algae, that would be seaweed. I got this call, and the call was, we have a master's program for you. And it happened to be Nick Long from American University, who had been using my mother's book, Believe the Heart, Our Dyslectic Days. So with many lunches, I actually changed my field and then decided to focus into education. But the bottom line was why he knew me was I wrote a chapter. I call myself a 5%er. So there's some learning disabled students that you can get them comfortably decoding words and reading, a little bit work, but there's others that just don't quite make it. So entering into college, I had really, my reading ability was not enough. I had all my textbooks on tape and did all my tests orally all the way through graduate school.
John, can I interrupt? I thought I remembered in us talking that when you were in elementary school, they thought you were developmentally disabled.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Well, we want to go there, yes. So in the 60s, especially in the 60s, you know, they didn't really have special education on a federal level. So my first IQ test put me at non-trainably mentally retarded. That's,
wow.
You know.
Wow.
I was good in the playground, though.
You still are.
I could play in the sandbox just fine.
Wow, that's amazing.
So part of that is to, you know, really go through and change my field and discover the elements that I could use personally in personal growth, and as well as my curiosity in science and botany and processing and learning have something in common, which is fuzzy logic. There's nothing super clear. Everybody's a little bit different. Every species of algae is a little different. So the curiosity, intellectual curiosity, but also the emotional way that we can support so many people that have learning difficulties is just so rewarding.
Okay, well, thanks for that, John. And here you are, and many years later, you've helped thousands of kids, and you've done it through these centers that you've opened, Developmental Learning Solutions. Why don't you tell us about what is that? What is that center? What takes place there? What do you do there?
So I think, you know, from somebody who had gone to many centers, had frustrated many professionals, I wanted to open a door, a safety door, for people that had not just have learning disabilities, but people that really have had not positive experience in learning. And really that the process of learning is really different than education. It just so happens to be that a lot of learning does happen in those couple of hours a day. So one of the things in reviewing, especially in the last 25 years, what have we done and done well? To say that DLS really has a base philosophy that there is no strength and weakness. That motto, thank goodness, and on a research basis, is really not true. That we really look at the individual and the way that they learn based on really things to develop. Access is really the access to curriculum as well as enrichment. That's confusing to people. Yeah. It's like, well, John can't learn doesn't know how to spell. It doesn't hold him back from learning his vocabulary words, as well as more advanced vocabulary that he's interested in. That would be the model.
So you open this center, and now what do you do there? What takes place within the center? What's the, you know, do they start and go through it like a car wash? What goes on there?
That's right. That would be easy. Every learner is different. So one of the biggest growth elements I've ever had was the first year of teaching learning disabled and emotionally disturbed adolescents is, not every learning different person learns the same. So we really open it up. Every program that we know technically is really designed around the client versus the other way around. So we do assessments. We do full developmental educational assessments, which are a little bit different than other assessments because we're not looking at just the what is it. It's really looking at how does this individual problem solve.
Okay.
And how does that? How can that person use that for the learning environment, or what might be holding it back? Mm-hmm. So from that information, and not everybody has to come in that way, but from that information, then develop a program where we are really looking at those three things plus one more. You know, the development, access, enrichment, but also developing the self. And this is where we work we have worked a lot in terms of how learning disabilities can really distort the self image.
Absolutely, John, and that's where you've been a lifesaver for me when families have come in with underachieving kids, and the school is saying, well, he's bright, but he just doesn't apply himself. He just won't sit down and do his homework. And then when I talk to the kid, it's like, I don't know where to start, or I start doing it and then I fall asleep, or I don't know what to do. I always get it wrong. It's overwhelming. And then I talk to parents and they say, well, we sit down with him, but then, he fights us and we don't know what to do. And, parents aren't trained tutors.
Right.
And, sometimes a kid in that environment has become oppositional and maybe even developing an initial negative identity. Mm-hmm. And sometimes not. Sometimes they're trying their very best to cooperate, but their self-esteem is falling like a stone and they're going no place. And then when you came into town and we had our Chinese lunch over at the Szechuan restaurant.
Yes.
I started bringing some kids over to you, and it's like, oh. And then what happened was you would do the testing, you'd come back to my office with your testing results, and we'd have the parents there and the kids there, and you would start off by talking about what a blast it was to spend time with that kid, what an amazing person they are, how they went about answering the questions, and how annoyed they got with you when you did the wrong thing, and you just got really playful and just shared what a wonderful experience it was to have time with that youth and get to know them. And as before we even went into the testing, they start to glow. Their energy would get up, and the parents would suddenly feel esteemed and like, oh.
That's right.
This is good news. This isn't we're going to find out what's all wrong with our child.
That's right.
This is really good news. And then you would talk about how brilliant the kid is and areas that they absolutely excelled in, and then began to show some of the areas that explain why they're not achieving in the way the school might expect them to. And then you would provide, here's what the school needs to do, and here's what the kid needs to do. And then it would be the parents and my job and the youth's job to figure out how we're going to work together to operationalize that plan and get out of their control battle and start collaborating. So that's how my experience is working with you.
Well, I think especially the assessment environment for us, and I'm old school as well, where, we use statistics, but really what's important is that Piaget appropriate challenge model, where it's more important to see how they got there than if the answer is right or wrong. And I think as soon as you start opening that discussion or environment, no matter if you're 4.5, where we assess people all the way up to 82, mm-hmm. They become relaxed because it's in any way that they solve it is fine, including emotional response. And that environment is just, and we try to carry that on in therapy. But the point of that is I think that once we start looking at what children were, especially adolescents, what happens to them is that they start protecting themselves, and we start really perceiving where other people he's just not working hard enough. It's just, if he just, put a little bit more effort in it.
Right.
My nerdiness comes out and look at research relative to motivation. There really isn't any. So that concept of low motivation, he only needs low motivation, is really not in our science that much. What's really important is what's the underlining reflection we're holding back from doing a task. And that's where you and I come in, where on a processing level, describing it, as well as an emotional level.
Right. Right.
And then we add in the family, and that's where the dynamics of teaming up with somebody like yourself is so essential. It's almost how do other families do it when they don't have the resources of two different professionals that are looking at the model differently.
John,
very exciting.
My approach with families, of course, is looking at the patterns of interaction and the patterns of communication in the family, where there's appropriate hierarchy, where there's appropriate access, where there's appropriate boundaries. Those are the things that a family therapist generally looks at. But you've been trained in family therapy as well in your program, and you have this other approach which has to do with, if you've got learning differences within the family, how are they processing the information back and forth in their communication?
I think especially in my graduate program where we concentrated so much on practical application, that's where it became it was almost aha. This is where I belong, where you could be in a family therapy situation, and one member is in trouble, usually the kid, and everybody's looking to them and saying, okay, now tell us what happened. And very few words come out, or just emotions. But looking and evaluating his expressive ability, his ability to express anything besides things that have emotions is limited. So by changing the question to show us what happened, so part of this is that communications can affect the aspects of family therapy, but also processing, attending, focusing. One of the members are looking out the window. It may not necessarily be intentional. On purpose.
Yeah. And what happens to a youth? What happens to them when their parents start communicating in a frustrated or angry tone?
That's
what happens to their processing at that point too?
And that's where as soon as emotions come in, we all have limitations in terms of accessing memory. We don't tend to sequence too well. We go in that fight-flight mode, and that becomes, on a processing level, to communicate to others becomes difficult.
So, John, when in your field did we stop using the word learning disabilities and shift over to learning differences? When did that happen, and please explain why?
Well, the terminology, especially in the United States, is very interesting. Taxonomy is also my thing too, but it used to be lots of, especially dyslexia used to be named lots of different things. It started to be described, learning disabilities started to be described 110 years ago. But the term initially started in terms of people that had difficulty with reading and writing, was really considered, started to be recognized as a specific language-based learning disability, dyslexia.
Okay.
Then what started to happen is the psychological field then took that and said, okay, well, let's call it a learning disability or a learning dysfunction. So there's that division. But the bottom line is, I think when we start, really about 15 years ago, when we start to realize that everybody learns differently, there's not two people in one room that listens to a lecture gets the same thing, that we all just learn differently, and that opened it up. Learning handicapping condition is actually a legal term. It's not even a clinical diagnostic term.
Okay.
So that's where we get. But really looking at the population of learners, we just learn differently, and the variations of learning, like we mentioned before, if high school required you to have perfect pitch or relative pitch to graduate, we have some people that have trouble graduating. Mm-hmm. But if you have people that have difficulty recognizing vowels, that can significantly affect their ability to talk or to read or to write. So society has a lot to do, especially what we demand.
Well, that's a very interesting issue, and so it begs the question, if we all learn differently, do teachers know that? Does the educational system know that? Are they teaching to the different kinds of learning brains, or is it a one-size-fits-all thing? I mean, you were in the schools all the time. What are you noticing out there?
So what the biggest push actually happens to be on the university level, where universities are not concerned, some of them are not concerned about giving accommodations to some people and not the other. If you need extra time on a test, you just use it. As well as universal model. And this is becoming increasingly exciting for higher education, where the end project could be a test. It could be a video. It could be a project. It's relative to the way that person expresses it.
Okay.
So that's slow. But we have this issue where we have to get an incredible amount of people in our society to learn how to read, write. So the model for what we have from K to 12 is really that everybody sits in that room and the expectation that 75% of them will learn. We don't have another type of model to use right now in the United States. Mm-hmm. So it does need to change. It's not that much harder, but teacher education is starting to realize that.
Are there places where they do realize that in public education, or are there places in private education that realize that and that have developed the skill and the mastery of teaching to a spectrum of learning styles?
Yes, and actually, even the what we would consider very conservative high school model, like from the French high school curriculum model, they push it by saying, okay, for a month and a half, you need to work with people and develop a project that you want to do, and so it's always been there. The issue now is, though, with public school is Common Core, and then the other is public schools justifying it. Where private schools, it's easy to say, okay, this month we have open courses and you express projects versus passing a test. So it is coming. There is charter schools out there that are also doing it.
And can kids who are able are doing assignments in alternative ways? Are they college prep? Are they preparing themselves, and are the schools really preparing them to go to school? This isn't a real dumbing down of curriculum. It's an actual, there's maintaining the learning standards and the knowledge standards?
Absolutely. I mean, there's a big difference between accommodating versus modifying. And a lot of teachers, a lot of people out there really get confused. Accommodations are how to get what will open that door to access to complete those objectives. The other one is, okay, the objectives are too high, modifying will bring them down. And I've never been an advocate of that. I much rather go for the extra credit. And we do push and are successful for students that it's going to be very difficult for them to remember their vocabulary words. We don't want them to decrease their vocabulary words. We just maybe, so give him extra credit if he finds word origins, if he identifies root, prefix, suffix. So part of that is expanding what we are expecting somebody to learn is another avenue or way to look at it. Personally, when I entered into college, I did have difficulty finding people who were ascribed to, I would dictate and they would write. So my first 2 papers in college were actually on cassette, and it was accepted. Actually, one of the professors used it for a demonstration. That type of model is very hard to get now. So flexibility is a moving target. It's like a pendulum.
Okay. So let's say, for whatever reason, I'm seeing my kid, who I've always thought of as quite bright, not hitting it, and the teacher's saying, well, pretty good, but, they're fine. They're fine. Just stay with it. They're fine. And you're seeing that they're getting B's and C's, and you have a PhD. Their other parent has a PhD. Their grandparents are right. What do you do?
So part of that is is, again, if everybody learns differently, taking a step back and having that person be in an environment where they're trying in a non-judgmental way, maybe 25, 35 different activities, an assessment, gives them insight. We've had even reports, third graders benefiting just from that environment where they, what did you do? That testing is supposed to be awful, and my son's doing better. It doesn't always happen, but part of that is giving more information to the student in terms of giving them a self-reflection of how they problem solve, as well as an outside perspective. Helps them understand, hey, I need to learn it this way. Really, the automatic study skill of cue cards for a lot of learning different people is not the way. And that just is stagnant and not beneficial. So they start learning how to learn, or not so much learn better, but learn how to perform in a way that they get those A's more effectively.
Okay. So could you explain for us a little bit what's the difference between educational therapy and tutoring? Is therapy really does it really change anything? Does it, and what does, if it does change something, what does it change?
I always jokingly say, well, it's cost. The biggest difference is tutoring, and it's not, tutoring has been a field for a very long time, but in general, we consider tutoring reiteration of curriculum. So you go to a tutor for algebra, they really submit or change the curriculum so the student can learn better in algebra. Educational therapy, which has been around for a good 90 years in this country, is really the remediation of the process of learning. So what we're working on is just not reading, writing, arithmetic, or algebra. We're looking at developing types of memory, ability to, utilize self-awareness of how they learn, as well as the emotional aspect of learning. Getting them to feel comfortable. Research, really kicks us out because they basically say if you have somebody, regardless of what their grades are, if they feel safe in that environment and confident, they're more likely to move on. We do have the other side where you have students that are getting straight A's, but they don't feel that that environment is safe, and they don't go on. So we deal with both of those.
Okay.
Our client range is quite big.
Okay. But there's a lot in the literature these days about the brain and about brain plasticity. How does that affect the work that you do with students?
Very much so. I think that the idea that a stagnant brain is no more, and that's extremely exciting, as well as the importance of stimulus or the environment in terms of releasing proteins at the right time in development is so essential. So when we have students that come in, even in kindergarten or first grade or second grade, that's where you can get tremendous growth by just giving the kid, the parents don't have time for reading to them, but books on tape. It's amazing. So that allows that development to be enriched, which is our model, but as well as working with middle-aged professionals that are stagnant in their jobs, getting them to understand that how they learn and working on specific techniques can help them expand plasticity as well as develop techniques to be more efficient.
So learning, so working with adults for career changes so they can learn new skills, and can you give an example of that? What kind of change would a career? How would this affect somebody in a career?
So the kind of typical is actually middle management, and they have a history of learning differences. They don't necessarily have to have been identified, but when you review their history, it's been a struggle. what happens is they're very good at one particular aspect of their job, and then they have either a lateral or a step up in their job. And then they don't have those skills that they had earlier educationally. They don't have them to be successful at a higher level or a different level. And that's where we come in and assess, looking at it. It used to be accommodations all the time, but it's really working with that professional multiple different ways. Includes technology, stepping back and utilizing them, or making sure that they're using their gifts. So do the report the way they want, and then do another one the way you want. See, that creativity, get them to use it versus the fear.
Okay. Fascinating, fascinating. How do they know to come to you? When, where's the cue? I mean, I think if a kid's in school and not succeeding, then they know to come to you. How does someone, what's the red flag for them?
So, I mean, when I came into the area, that seemed to be where I got a lot. In Washington, D.C., it was one of my concentrations, as well as, certain professionals like yourself refer adults to me as well. So I get direct referrals.
Okay.
And then referrals from companies, too, periodically.
Great. Hey, we've got a question from our viewers. What about language learning? It's rumored that happens best before the age of 10, and after that we're going to struggle with it. Can you tell me what you can about learning, I guess, secondary languages? Yeah.
Well, 10 years ago we'd say absolutely, but unfortunately we have more plasticity, and research is showing that. But actually, language development really begins really at zero, or really before that. Sounds and how the brain starts interpreting sounds, especially in a particular language, is how we develop it. We have known for a long time that certain areas of our development enhances language. And this happens between really 2.5 to 4. So ideally, best time to learn a language, if you don't have a learning disability, is really in those earlier years before you get to 8.5. When you get older, then you have to go back, and it's not necessarily innate development of a second language. You actually have to work on learning. So I guess if you put me in a corner, when you're younger, it innately comes. When you're older, you have to work at it. But it shouldn't stop you. It shouldn't stop you.
Can a sexagenarian like myself actually learn Italian?
Yeah, well, I'm still trying to learn English. So I was a late talker, so I didn't talk until 3.5, and now it's just hard to stop.
You're making up for lost time, John. So
that's right.
Forgive
you.
Right. So here's another area that I think is important, and that is about advocacy, because I know that you've gone to schools and been an advocate for students, but you also have trained parents to advocate for students, letting them know what their rights are and the right words to use. But then, even more importantly, I think you've taught students how to advocate for themselves, and at the end of the day, that's where the whole cycle closes, and we get real great success. And I'll let you talk about it, but I have to say that's my son Daniel, whom you worked with, really learned those advocacy skills, and he learned to charm the chalk out of the teacher's hand. And so they always knew, it didn't matter if they had, when he went to college, it didn't matter if there was an auditorium with 450 kids in it. They knew Daniel because he made contact. He learned how to make contact, and he would always go up and say, hey, what do I need to do to succeed in your class? And the teacher would just spend time with them, love it, and it was great. So tell us about advocacy and learning differences. Yeah,
the research is also showing it's if you tell the student to always say, oh, I have a learning disability to anybody, it's really not enough information because everybody learns differently. But if you have the student really understand, hey, this is what I do well, in, this is where I'm going to struggle in, you know, really have a conversation about the learner they are. That greatly helps them in, you know, whatever grade all the way up. I've also been involved with teacher education for also the last 18 years, but now private schools and sometimes public schools hire me to try to get really teachers to understand their curriculum, how to talk to students, not about their poor grade, but hey, how do you learn? And what's the best way for you to get the information? So that conversation actually needs to go both ways, and it can be very rewarding. It's just this year, it brings tears to my eyes, seeing, you know, people that, kids that have felt so degraded, and literally going into an IEP meeting in ninth grade and starting the meeting with their letter. This is how I learned, this is what I need.
Oh, wow. Uh-huh.
It basically then stops me having to say, you know, this is what you need to provide. It's basically, Joe, things that you need to provide.
Okay.
It is very true. And it requires that really mending. The scars of what happens in terms of that learning environment are deep.
They are.
Which is another area.
They are. You know, I'm still school phobic. I you know, when I first go into a school and I start to smell how a school smells, you know, I start with PTSD, sets right in. You know, it takes me a while to relax and just get back into my adult. It's not always easy.
Well, as a professional, I really had to go back into therapy to actually address that, because that starts those triggers. And it's really, you know, when you're going into a school for a student, it's really not about yourself. So I kind of knew that I really needed to try to figure out how to release these triggers. So yes, they are with professionals as well as parents. I mean, that's something that we work with as well.
Well, we have some esteemed audience members, and Robin, you have a question from our audience. Could you share that, please?
I'm muting myself. Yeah, from Elaine Nieberding. She says, I see that DLS has to do with discovering learning style. Does some of your testing hone in on visual, auditory, or kinesthetic style, or the balance between those?
Yes, absolutely. On an observational level, and then we also do a specific test for that, as well as try to integrate that. This always gets me in trouble, though. It's because in a lot of cases, really, you can say, oh, this person has difficulty in visual processing. Well, it may not be the full story. He might not be able to remember what he sees linguistically, but he can remember any design. So we kind of get away from that in terms of really trying to get the student to really describe themselves as a little bit more dynamic. It's difficult because that's what it's easier to say, oh, I'm a visual learner. The best is most of the students we work with, actually all students except a small percentage, really learn by experiencing. So I say you're an experiential learner.
Okay.
Because the way you learn varies too, in terms of the environment, the level.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Excellent. Okay. Are there other questions or comments coming in, Robin?
Yeah, there's one more comment here that Elaine is commenting that she loves your comment about advocacy, that it's important for students to advocate for themselves. And the comment I also loved about your son charming the chalk out of the teacher's hand, that is, that's really cute.
Yes, right now he's charming himself into a PhD, so.
Well, I guess you taught him some good charming skills.
And he spent a lot of time with John. So when I saw myself in Daniel as a youngster, I said, okay, I'm not going to make him go through the same torturous experiences I went through, and he got those advocacy skills very early. He understood his learning styles. He understood how to approach things, and now he's a very efficient user of time management skills, and he knows how to strategically go about getting things done. And then he's got his weekends, and then and now he's doing these extreme fitness things. And he's running a marathon this coming weekend. So he's found a way to kind of put it all together in a package. And this is a kid who inherited his father's learning disabilities. So
awesome.
Yeah, that's off to him.
And he had great parents too.
Yeah, well, he did have parents that really cared, and that's the thing. I mean, most in all the families that come to see me, they're parents that care. I mean, right. People don't come to me because they don't care, and they don't come to you because they don't care.
That's
they come
true.
because there's a problem that doesn't make sense, or a problem that doesn't get solved when their best efforts at solving a problem don't serve them well. Yes. So when they find themselves in that rut, that's when they come to me or to you.
Yes. Yeah, that's true. Very true. Very true.
Okay. So, John, what else would you like to share with our audience today? Is there something that's going on at DLS that they should know about?
Well, I think DLS had a business plan when I came into town, and really, I had been sidetracked by teacher education, but reflecting the last 25 years is, again, trying to figure out the professionals that I work with are dynamic. They're fantastic. We're not mono-method. But what do we do that brings people in a comfortable way to start investigating how they can be successful? And just starting to really expand on that idea that there is no weakness. We're straight. Disability, not disability. In my mind, there's only a legal definition, not really a clinical definition.
Okay.
So that means that, and so I think that element of realizing the self is just as important to develop as reading, writing, arithmetic. We're passing chemistry. Because in some cases, we have to get students ready and comfortable flunking a class. But what are you going to learn from this experience? It's not going to be a grade. So part of that is developing grit. Really starts at really accepting the person exactly the way they are, and getting the parents to feel that way too.
Absolutely. And John, I just love that. I think that's a perfect ending spot. Is because that's so important in my work, and it's so rewarding to hear that that's so important in your work too. That we really are connecting there, because that's, at the end of the day, we want our kids to shine for who they are, not for their deficiencies. And thank you so much for bringing that. And John, thanks so much for being such a great guest on my second Therapy Talk show. And I've done 2 now, and we'll take a break, and they will have 3 programs in June. And I'm looking forward to those as well. So thank you to the audience and those people that have tuned in for Therapy Talk. And we'll take May off, and I look forward to being with you again in June.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, and keep loving yourself.
That's right.